All right, looks like we are live. Hey, everybody. How are you doing? Happy April 29th. How's this week going? Are you having a good week? Did you sleep with storms last night? We had some pretty big storms last night. Did you enjoy the beautiful weather today? We had some really nice weather today. Did you remember that today was Wednesday? That's my problem, is that these days are kind of blending together, and I forget which day is what sometimes. I'm really glad you're tuning in and studying along with us tonight. I really enjoy these Wednesday nights, and I hope that you are learning something and are growing and being encouraged by our times together on these Wednesday nights. I really appreciate Ricky's lesson last week. Don't you just love Mr. Ricky and Miss Jody? They do such a good work for us at Campbell Road. And their teaching and their example, they just help us grow so much. And last week, Mr. us by seeing how Joshua and the armies of Israel got ready to go into Canaan. You remember that? How they sent in the spies, and Rahab hid the spies and kept them safe. And then they went back and they reported to Joshua, "We can do it. We can take them." And Joshua and Israel crossed the Red Jordan. Remember that the waters parted and they got those stones and they set up the memorial. They crossed the Jordan and now they're ready to go and have their first major battle. I love the way that Ricky taught that. He did just a great job setting and helping us get ready for tonight, because tonight is battle time. Tonight it's time to look at the first battle that God's people have in the promised land. We're going to be in Joshua chapter 6 if you want to get your Bibles. Now, as you can see behind me, you're going to need a piece of paper and something to write down. We're going to do some drawing and some writing as we work through this incredible chapter in the Bible. We are looking tonight at the Battle of Jericho in Joshua chapter 6. One thing that we remember about Jericho is that they had these huge walls around this city, these massive walls. In fact, back in Deuteronomy chapter 9, Deuteronomy 9 and verse 1, it says, "Hear, O Israel, you are crossing over the Jordan today to go in to dispossess nations greater and mightier than you, great fortified cities to heavens." Isn't that interesting? So God says you're going in, and these nations and these cities, they're bigger than you, they're stronger than you, their cities are built up to the heavens. Well, Jericho would fit that description. I want to give you just some information I found out about the walls of Jericho. It wasn't just one big massive wall. That's sometimes how I picture it. It was just one big wall that kind of circled the whole city. That wasn't it. It was really made up of three walls. As this Mount Jericho, this slope, there was three walls that kind of were built along the slope of Jericho. The first wall was built out of stone, and it was around, let me get my paper here, it was somewhere between 12 and 15 feet high. So 12 to 15 feet high out of stones. Then there was the next layer behind it, built out of mud and bigger stones, mud and maybe some bricks. And this was between 20, at least I'm going to put it 20-ish feet high. And then was the massive wall that stood on top, and this would surround the city. And this one, it estimated somewhere between 30 and 40 feet high. Can you imagine that? Can you see? It wasn't just that they had to get over one wall. They had a whole mountain that they had to try and climb and get past just to get to this city. Now, Jericho was really important. They had to win this battle for a couple of reasons. One, they had to win this battle spiritually because God made a promise. God promised them the land is yours. God promised the land to you. Well, if they lost this battle, what does that say about God? What does it say about his promises? If they lose this battle, can they trust God for any other battle? Does God really mean what he says? And so they needed this. as a boost to their faith. We can trust in God and what He says. They needed to win this battle, at least just for themselves. We might just say courageously, because if they couldn't beat Jericho, if they couldn't win this first battle, could they win any other one? If they couldn't beat Jericho, could they beat any other city, any other army in the? And really, they needed to beat this one strategically. Have you ever played a game, maybe like Risk, where you have to think about where you fight, you fight? Israel's coming into the promised land from the east. Well, I guess maybe this would be east for you. This camera's all backwards. They're coming. Well, as they come in from the east, Jericho was a strong, well fortified, well weaponized city. They couldn't go around it. They couldn't bypass it, because if they just tried to ignore Jericho and go around it, now you have Jericho behind them, and Jericho could come and attack them at any moment. It was important that they had to stop and beat Jericho first. And if they could beat Jericho, overcome this city, they could divide the rest of the promised land in half. They could cut off the enemies and split them in two, because Jericho was right in the middle ground of the promised land. If they could conquer Jericho, they could drive a wedge between the rest of the enemies. And so they had to win here. But look at the walls. I mean, look how high it was. Look how strong it was. Full of stones, well built, well fortified. You're looking at that, you're wondering how? How are you going to win? How do you get over? How do you crush these walls? How do you get past them? How do you even get inside the city? They could stay in there for a long time. They're quarantined. They can't, and no one's getting in, no one's getting out of Jericho. How could they do it? At least from man's eyes, trying to overcome Jericho, trying to defeat those walls, seemed impossible. Didn't seem like it could happen. Let me ask you a question tonight. Are there things in your life that seem impossible? You ever find things in your life that just seems like it's just, there's no way to overcome it, no way to defeat it, kind of like staring at a giant wall? Can you fill some in with me? And maybe your list would look different than mine. Leave the space in the middle open, but let's fill in some in our wall, in our lives that might just seem too hard to overcome, just too impossible. We might put up here sickness. Let's just go ahead and write it. Let's put up that COVID-19 on there. Maybe sometimes sicknesses. Can someone get better? What if it's really bad? What if the doctors don't have answers? What if they don't know? What if they keep having to run tests? What if they keep having to do different treatments? Sometimes sicknesses can seem really, really scary, maybe hard to overcome. What about fear? Some things I'm afraid of. Sometimes fears can be hard to face. Maybe I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of the dark. Maybe I'm afraid of failing. I don't want to fail. I don't want to disappoint my parents. I don't want to disappoint those who are important to me. And so sometimes I overcome my fear to do things that I know I need to do, that my family wants me to do, that God expects me to do. Fear can seem like a giant wall in front of me. Maybe it's just, let's put up here, maybe broken relationships. Maybe there's a friendship that's no longer good anymore. Words have been said, something happened, and I'm just not friends with them anymore, or anymore. Maybe something's happened in a family, and the family isn't as close as it used to be. Maybe I have some, maybe even at church, or some people are just we're not as close. We're not as our relationship's not as good as it used to be. Is there any way for a broken relationship to ever get restored? To ever come back to being in a good place again? How about this one? We might put up here sin or failure. Oh man, I've broken God's commandments. I've broken God's laws. Is there any way I could be forgiven? Is there ever a second chance for me? Could things ever turn around for good? Would people ever give me a second chance? Would they ever let me try and prove that I'm trustworthy again after this, after a sin and a failure? How do I overcome that? How can I make this right when it seems impossible to overcome this, impossible to climb this, impossible to defeat this? You know, some things that maybe your moms and dads are facing. Sometimes it's this thing called debt. Owing a lot of money can seem like a big mountain, can seem like a giant wall. How do I get out of this? You just owe and owe and owe, and you just seems like you're digging and digging and digging yourself in further and further. You just can't get out. Yep. Debt is certainly one for some. For others, maybe it's unemployment goes along with that. Am I ever going to get a job? Am I ever going to get a means for money? Am I ever going to find a job again, find employment again? Yep. There's a lot of things we could put up here for people today. A lot of this comes over here too. I'm sure there's a lot of moms and dads today who are worried about sickness or illness, about the quarantine. There's some things that just seem impossible, that just seem too much. It seems like it's beyond us to be able to overcome. God's people, God promised them that they could have the promised land. Canaan is yours. And as soon as they cross over the Jordan, the first place they come to is a city with huge, impenetrable walls. What were they to do? It seemed impossible. They can't climb it. They can't throw rocks at it. They didn't have catapults. How could they overcome these walls? Are you ready to read with me? Let's see what God does for his people. First thing, we need back to chapter 5 in Joshua 5. Joshua 5, beginning verse 13, it says, "It came about when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said, 'Are you for us or for our adversaries?' He said, 'No. Rather, indeed, I come now as the captain of the hosts of the Lord.' And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down, and he said to him, 'What has my Lord to say to his servant?' The captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, 'Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy.' And Joshua did so. First thing before they go to Jericho is that God comes to Joshua, just like he did to Moses. Before God sent to go and to lead God's people out of Egypt, God comes to Moses, and he comes in this incredible fiery bush. Remember that? The burning bush. And when Moses was there, God says, 'Take off your sandals. The ground you're standing is holy.' Well, here, God's coming to Joshua, God's leader, the leader of his people. And same thing. He's coming in this incredible form. It's not a burning bush. It's the captain of the armies of the Lord. And he comes here, and he tells them the same thing. The thing is holy. Take off your sandals. Ooh, I don't know about you, but I wish I could have heard what this captain said to Joshua. I wish I could have heard what he said to try and muster up some courage and some strength before Joshua led the people into Jericho. So the first thing God does is he gets Joshua ready. You got to get the leader ready. Now, we're in chapter 6. You ready? Chapter 6, the Lord says to Joshua in verse 2, he says, "I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once. You shall do so for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall be that whenever they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people out with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up every man straight ahead." I don't know about that. You ever heard about that? Just walking around the city, and then you do it once a day. And the people weren't to make a word. Just the priests had their trumpets, and they carried the ark. And so the nation was to walk around the city once a day, and they were to do that for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, to walk around 7 times. And then they're supposed to shout, and the walls are going to fall down. How's that seem to you? Does it seem like that would work? Can you imagine if you walked around your house for 6 days, and then on the 7th day you walked around 7 times? Do you think your house would fall down? No, me neither. I don't think it would happen like that. No. Can you imagine what Israel must have thought? What are we doing? I mean, how are you supposed to win by just walking around this city? Can you imagine what the people in Jericho thought? At first, they might have thought, we're cracking the wall. Or maybe they're looking for a weakness. They're just trying to intimidate us. But then by the third or fourth day, they probably were thinking they've lost their minds. What are they doing? What are you doing down there? You know, it's a nice parade, but we're up here. Can't get us. It would have done no good. Sometimes God's plans don't always make a lot of sense to us. We may not be able to understand it, and we may not be able to see it. But Joshua trusted in God. Israel trusted in God. And so once a day, they walked around the city. Didn't say a word. Trumpets were blown. The ark was led. On the seventh day, they walked around 7 times. And at the last circling, the last time, the last loop around, the trumpets blew, the people shouted, and those walls, those incredible, mighty, fortified walls came tumbling down. And the people were able to walk up. It was almost like a ramp. It fell down the mount and made a nice ramp for God's people to march straight into. Those walls came tumbling down. What's that tell us? Well, that's why we got to come over here. There are some great takeaways we see from what God showed, what God did for his people, and what he can do for us today. You ready? Here's number 1. God promises. God promises. The question is, do I believe him? God promises. Look again in verse 2. This is Joshua 6 and verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I've given Jericho into your hand with its king and its valiant warriors." Even before a sword is drawn, even before an arrow is slung, even before they start marching, God promises you've won. You've already won. The battle is yours. I'm giving it into your hand. Joshua just had to believe it. Joshua had to believe in what God said. Israel needed to believe. Here's the thing. God makes promises to us all the time. That is, he's made some incredible promises to us. We find them here in his words. God has promised us heaven. The beautiful, incredible home for those who believe in him, those who follow him. Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe it's there? He has promised that he's with us always, even when we feel alone, even when it seems isolated or quarantined, when it seems like no one's around us. God promises he's always there. Do you believe him? God promises he always prayers. If we're walking with him, if we're walking in the light, if we're praying with good, humble hearts, God hears our prayers. Sometimes it may feel like no one's really listening to us. No one hears what I'm saying. No one's giving me time to listen to me, but God does. God promises. God promises that if you believe and are baptized, you shall be saved. Mark 16:16. Do you believe that? Do you believe that too? God makes promises. Do I believe in what he says? Sometimes what challenges our belief, what challenges our belief in God's promises, the giant walls that we face. You see, God had already told his people that they were going to win. God had already told them that the promised land was going to be theirs. But the first thing they see when they come to the promised land is this giant wall, this giant fortified wall. Well, who are they going to believe? The wall or God? And sometimes that's us. God has made some incredible promises. Promises about peace. Don't be anxious. Right? Don't be anxious for everything by prayer and supplication. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4. Do I believe that? Sometimes it seems like God has made promises, but we see these giant walls of doubt and fear in our lives, and we forget. Sometimes we don't believe in what God has said. God promises, believe him. Here's the second thing we see. God commands. Do I obey him? God commands. Do I obey him? God has some specific commands here. once a day for 6 days. They're to march around the city. And then on the seventh day, they were to march 7 times. And then there were instructions for the priests and their trumpets and the ark and instructions about how they were to be quiet, the people. Now, here's the thing. Have you ever wondered, you look at those commands and Joshua says, whew, that's going to take a lot of time. Why don't we just do one day 13 times around and save us a lot of time? Or, rather than doing it this way, kind of divide up in tribes. One tribe take a day, and we'll each do by tribes. We'll each do our work, and by the seventh day, we'll all go around. Or, what if today they got busy, they were hanging out, and they forgot on the third day, oh, we forgot to go march around. Or, what if one of the priests forgot his trumpet? They're out in the tent. What would happen? Let me ask you, if Joshua did not obey God completely, do you think God would have given them the land? Do you think God would have? Do you think God would have let them overcome Jericho? No, I don't either. In fact, if you go back to Joshua chapter 1, and you hear what God says to Joshua, in Joshua chapter 1, it says in verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book is depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have success. You hear God saying, I've given you my word. I've given you the law. Follow it, and you will find grace. It's the opposite of that. If you don't follow it, you're not going to have success. God's not going to bless you along the way. God commands, do I obey him? Let me ask you some questions. Ready? God says that we are to honor our fathers and our mothers. Honor and obey. We honor them by respecting them. We honor our moms and dads by listening to them, by showing respect, by not back-talking or being rude, by doing what they say right away, the right way. Let me ask you a question. Are you obeying your parents? Are you honoring mom and dad while under the quarantine? God teaches in his word that we always speak the truth, that we don't lie. We speak the truth in love. And so let me ask you a question. Do we lie? But what if I'm going to get in trouble? What if in order to tell the truth, it might come with consequences? Because maybe I did something bad. I broke something I wasn't supposed to break, or maybe I turned on something, maybe the TV, and I wasn't supposed to turn it on. Is it okay then to maybe just tell a white lie? No. God commands, and I must obey him. Obey him always. Joshua listened to God. Joshua obeyed God, even when it didn't make a lot of sense. And because of it, those walls fell down. Are you obeying God? Are you listening to his word? Are you doing your best to do everything that he says? All right, here's our third one. Ready? God delivers. God delivers. Do I rely on him? See, what would happen if Joshua and his men, God commands me and says, I want you to march around the city 7 times and it's going to fall down. And Joshua says, I don't think so. You see our guys? We got spears. We got bows. We got this. That plan is just too strange. It doesn't seem like it's going to work. So we're going to do it our way. And we're going to take it. We're just going to run up it. We're going to shoot some catapults and some rocks. We're going to use some ropes. We're going to take it on our own. Let me ask you, if Joshua and his men tried to battle Jericho without God, do you think they would have won? I don't either. I don't think so. No, I know they would have lost. This would have been impossible. The only way to overcome this impossible battle, these impenetrable walls, was doing it God's way. God delivers. Rely on him. Here's the thing. You are going to face some things in your life, some moments in your life that seem absolutely impossible. And there's so much we could put on here. Like we have sickness, disease, broken relationships and fear, Sin, failure, disappointment, unemployment, maybe some more. Let's put some more. Maybe expectations. Some people are saying that they want me to be a certain person, to accept certain responsibilities or roles, and I just don't feel like I'm able. I don't feel like I'm able to rise to the challenge, to meet those expectations, to be who it is they want me to be, or to do what it is they want me to do. There are some people who can't get out of their past. Maybe that's bad habits they've gotten into, bad habits that they've formed. You know, I'm just used to being lazy. Or maybe I'm spending time with bad people, bad relationships, people that don't help me get close to God, people who hurt me, who take me away from God. Or maybe it's habits like lying. I just don't tell the truth. I try and avoid it by telling white lies. Maybe it's things I'm putting in my body, on my body, doing with my body. Maybe it's just the run of my past. I've made a lot of mistakes and they're catching up with me. There's a lot that just seem impossible to overcome this. Well, on my own, I can't. I can't. So here's the major point. You ready? One point from Joshua 6. Nothing. Hear it again. Nothing is impossible with God. Nothing. There is nothing that exists. There is nothing too great, nothing too strong, nothing too complicated. There is nothing impossible with God. That's what's said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 26. The apostles asked who could be saved. And Jesus answers, he says, with man, it's impossible, but with God, all are possible. Nothing's impossible. Which means, even if I don't have the answers, even if I don't know how it's going to get better, even if I don't understand it. I don't understand how it could improve. I don't understand the next step. Even if it seems far-fetched, hard to believe. Have I stopped believing in God? Have I stopped trusting that He can do all things? Have I stopped praying, asking Him for His help, for His strength, and His deliverance? There's nothing up here, and nothing we could possibly fill on this board that would be God. God can cure every sickness. God can deal with COVID-19. God can overcome every fear and conquer it with faith. God can restore broken relationships. He can bring prodigals back home. God can help us break our bad habits and form good habits. God can help us overcome the rut of our past by helping us with a new and a focused and a redeemed, a good future. God can help us overcome sin and failure with good moments in the future, with success in the future. God can help us out of debt, using our time, using our habits well, working hard for money, or perhaps bringing people into our lives to help us overcome moments that we're down in debt, people with generosity. God can opening up doors and opportunities, and anything else we could put up here. Think about it. Maybe your list is going to look different than mine. What might seem impossible? What might no way out of? Have you heard people talk a lot about that with this quarantine, with what's going on today? This sickness is so bad. There's no, it seems like there's no cure. There's no medication. There's nothing to prevent it. No vaccines. Well, I say nothing. Well, there's God. There's God. There's nothing we can do to overcome this situation. Our country is desperate. The world is desperate. What about God? God majors in the impossible. With God, Nothing, nothing. So I want you to look at two passages with me. Go to Mark chapter 9 in your Bibles. Go to Mark 9. I want to read just a little bit in this section about a dad who had a problem with one of his sons. One of his son was demon possessed, and the apostles couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't bring the demon out of him. And so he brings his boy to Jesus, and he says in verse 22, this is Mark 9 and verse 22, he says that the demon has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. He answers him and says, if you can, all things are possible to him who believes. The next verse he says, immediately the boy's father cried out and says, I do believe, help my unbelief. Do you see what he's saying here? The father says, if you can do anything, I'm desperate. If possibly you could do something, I need your help. And Jesus says, if. You should not be asking if, you should be saying since you can do everything, because you can do everything. All things are possible to him who believes. So maybe for some of us here, we need to pray is what the Father prayed. Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. Help those times that I doubt in your power, that I've forgotten your promises, that I forget that you have delivered your people before and deliver your people today. All right, one last verse. Ready? 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5. Possible to him that believes. That's what Jesus said. All right, 1 John chapter 5. 1 John 5 and a verse 4. Ready? Let's get our Bibles. Here we go. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world. What? Our faith. Our faith. Anything is possible to him who believes. Faith. No, it's not that I'm overcoming these impossible things in my life. It's that I believe in the God who can. I believe God can. I believe it. All right. Well, so what's this mean for us? What's our takeaway today? What are we going to do with this for the rest of this week? Are you ready? God can do anything and everything. Anything and everything. Okay. Am I believing in his promises? Because God can do anything, do I believe in the promises that he's given? Maybe I need to go back and read some more. Take in and breathe in God has offered to us. Promises of peace, promises of his presence, promises of the strength that he offers us every day. And believe it because he means it. Maybe I need to ask this one. God commands us, gives us orders, gives us rules for a reason. You know, the way I describe it to my boys is that it's a lot like signs on the road. And so if you're driving down the street, you see all sorts of signs. When you're out, pay attention with mom and dad. Look at all those signs. There's stop signs, there's yield signs in the triangle, there's signs about flooding. Some will and say flooding zone, don't cross. Do you know why we have those signs? It's not to make driving harder. Those signs exist to keep us safe. Those signs exist to help us safely navigate to where we're going. Well, do people have to? No, don't have to. The next time you see a stop sign, you can ignore it, but it could come with some really bad consequences. Get pulled over and go to jail. You could run into another car and hurt your car. It could be worse. You get into a major accident. You could lose your life. Signs exist to help you safely navigate through life. That's the same thing with God's commands. They exist to help you live the best life possible and to safely navigate from earth to home. I may not understand completely all of God's commands, kind of like walking around the walls. I may not fully understand why he commands me to do the things he does, but I know he's good. I know my God is good. I know he loves me unconditionally enough to give his son for me. And so whatever he asks me to do, walking around walls 7 times, blowing trumpets, or Grasp myself, loving even my enemies, not letting any unwholesome tongue or words on my tongue, out of my lips, whatever it may be, I'm going to listen to this God. And God delivers. So, rely on might look like a lot of different things this week. I want to give you one specific one. You ready? Is there something bothering you right now? Is there something causing you to worry? Keeping you from sleeping at night? Do you realize, however great or big or impossible it seems, it's nothing compared to God? So whatever it is that you might be afraid of, whatever it is that might seem really difficult in your life, tonight, will you do something for me? Will you pray about it? Will you talk to God about it? Tell him your feelings. Share with him your concerns. Tell him about this wall in your life. And ask him for deliverance. Ask him for his help. It may not be to have the wall crumble right in front of you. No, it may just be giving you the strength and the peace to live with the wall in your life. See, you may not take away COVID-19 in a day, but you know what? He can give me enough faith and enough courage and enough love of brethren and family to deal with any kind of quarantine or any kind of sickness, with or without that disease. Nothing is impossible with God. Thank you so much for studying with me tonight. Don't lose your faith. Don't quit believing in God. Don't stop thinking that God can't do God majors in the impossible. I hope that this has been encouraging to you, and I hope that maybe this has helped you refocus some of your thoughts, chase away some of your fears, and has given you enough tools this week to end this week with a confident faith in God. Listen, I love you all so much. I love you and I miss you, and I know it's not going to be long, and we're going to be together soon. It's a big hug. Say your prayers tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night.